be a bot in here in a minute that was really disappointed that we weren't ready to go at like 5.
It's true. It's true. I've been getting frantic texts from no one. Just the most frantic.
Do you want to practice some primal scream therapy before the episode?
If you want me to not have a voice for this episode.
Yeah, it wouldn't be entirely wise.
The first frost has really come through. Not the first frost, but the first like coolness.
Yeah.
And I've lost like 18% of the power of my voice.
Yeah.
It'll come back as my voice gets used to the cold, but the first couple weeks of October are always like a kick in the dick for me.
Yeah.
Balls. All right. Are you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1.
Hey man, Furby and Tamagotchi. Bill Clinton's the president.
This guy goes fully for 90s. Why weren't you singing any of the songs from this week?
I think you know why.
I just gave you one that you could sing right before we started.
Yeah, but that's not one we had to listen to.
TotemTalks is a podcast.
I think Tamagotchi, it's the 90s, Bill Clinton's the president was where I needed to go.
Okay.
I stand by it.
When you say Tamagotchi twice, I can't help but hear it in like Bohemian Rhapsody. Tamagotchi, Tamagotchi, it's the 90s. It's, that immediately is where my head goes.
I get it. Welcome in everybody to another episode of Totem Talks. This is our half-season finale.
That's right.
This is our half-season of That's So 90s. And it certainly has been so very, very 90s.
Yeah, there's no other way to say it.
It's so interesting because you think of it and you're like, you instantly recognize the 90s in like fashion and feel and music. And then you listen to 8 artists that are all primarily famous in the 90s and you go,
and they're so different.
They're so vastly different, but also so 90s the whole way through. Mm-hmm. And today is no different. But before we go too far, you are Nick, I am Pat, and this is Totem Talks.
That's right.
A podcast, yes, but also a journey.
Really a way of life.
It is a way of life. The way, the truth, and the totem. And it's a journey through space and time.
That's right.
To determine the greatest musical artist of all time. And the question today, as it always is, Nick.
Of course.
Did we find that artist today?
I mean, maybe. But definitely not. I don't know if that helps.
No, that helps, and I get it.
Perfect.
I get it. Without too much ado.
No, I don't think
Nick,
that. Yeah.
Why don't you tell us who we're covering today?
I would love to. So we are going to kick things off with Primal Scream, and then we're going to wrap things up with 311.
Indeed, we are, and
or 311. I'm going to say
no. It's 311.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 311, but it just occurred to me. I was like, I've never actually fact checked that. So, okay.
Well, that's because they were my band, and I did fact check it. Don't you worry. But that's not who we're covering first. So why don't we go ahead and get things started with Primal Scream. Primal Scream are a Scottish rock band originally formed in 1982 in Glasgow. And they are still active today, 1982 to the present day. Right. We covered 3 albums. We started with Sonic Flower Groove from 1987. we wrapped things up. We continued on with Screamadelica from 1991. And then we wrapped things up with Chaosmosis from 2016.
Yes. And I will begin because this is my group this week. And I don't really know what I expected coming into this. I only knew that their second album, Screamadelica, is like widely considered a classic. But I've never heard any of their songs. And what I got was that they very much beat Oasis to the punch. This is like maybe what the Beatles could have sounded like if they started in 1987. It's like it's very jangle poppy. Like you can tell it's the 80s when this is happening, but also at the same time it feels like maybe Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Ray Davies all got together and like wrote these songs for them. Which is a good thing. I think I'm saying like the comparisons, not that I'm saying they're as good as the Beatles or the Kinks, but like the style of song, Beatles, Kinks, Oasis, like it was a record that I enjoyed. Like this is a good album. I thought that the songwriting, like maybe it's not like the peak of what this group is capable of, but as a debut, I think they have some solid influences. I think they have a good sound. So I did like their debut record here.
Sure. Listen, I agree on the principle of it. I thought for the most part it was enjoyable. Here's what I said. I mean, it was definitely not what I expected.
No.
Based on the name of the band.
Yeah, exactly.
The name of the band is literally Primal Scream. I was certainly not expecting jangle pop, indie folk situation, like at all. It does have a decent groove or musical feel to it. Like it vibes well together. The album.
The band didn't have a drummer.
Well,
I don't know if you look at they had like all studio drummers, which usually means you're going to get a very good musician.
Yeah.
But like Primal Scream themselves did not have an official drummer at this point,
which is fascinating. Realistically, the positives that I have are similar to yours. It's creative songwriting at times. It's got a very good feel to it. It does feel more old school. You mentioned it feels like the old school artists were writing in the modern age. I wrote similarly that it felt like it was old school artists. So like it felt like it was artists from the 60s or 70s that were creating. It's a good comp. It makes sense. It's a decent album and honestly better than I expected from a band named Primal Scream.
Yeah, exactly. There's always a worry when you go in and they're called Primal Scream.
And then I'll take us into Screamadelica. So at this point, I am expecting that like jangle pop, indie folk, neo psychedelic sound. I'm no longer expecting like
metal,
screaming metal, and that is I'm in a better spot in my brain. And this album is completely different than the first one. Like just not even close to the same album as the first one. So they've managed to double subvert my expectations. It's an extremely different sound. It's more, I would say, like dancey.
It's like it's such a hard combination to even describe, but like they've definitely like brought dance music and sampling. Like I feel like they've almost stolen a lot of ideas from hip hop, but like also have remained in other ways influenced by like bands like the Beatles and the Stones.
Yeah, so you're still getting some of that like neo psychedelia in there, a little bit of that, but you're also getting like dance rock, some groovy like situations throughout in that like alt rock space. You're getting some like choral harmonies at times. It's an interesting groove. The negative that I have for this album, which is the negative I have for the first album too, it's less apparent here than the first album, but I forgot to mention it. The vocals are underwhelming.
Sure.
Like the vocals are just flat out underwhelming. They're hitting the notes, but there's like no oomph or vocality behind them. which is fine. It's not, it doesn't do enough to like really take me out of it, but it's definitely what I would consider the weakness in this group is like the vocals are
Mhm.
way closer to like average or slightly below average than kind of anything else.
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely more varied, as we mentioned. I will say some of it gets weird.
Yeah, sure.
It definitely does toe the line of weird. One song example I had of that is "Don't Fight It, Feel It." So like a 7-minute song, and I would say like 4.5 of those minutes are like some type of weird breakdown in the middle of it.
Mhm.
So there are moments like that. If that's what you're into, cool. If that's
Sure.
not what you're into, also cool.
Okay.
So that's what I've got.
All right, so I gotta start by talking about the first song. So "Moving On Up" is what this record opens on, and it's definitely a leap in their sound, but this very much feels like the Rolling Stones epic type of song, even with like the female lead or backing vocals and stuff. Like this is like "You Can't Always Get What You Want" or "Give Me Shelter." It feels like it's in that category of song to me. Feels like it was written to fit that mold in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And then, as you mentioned, like the record continues to take a lot of interesting and sometimes bizarre turns. There's like this strange blend of not only genres, but of also like original compositions with samples, which is not something that you hear that often with a rock group. And it's not something you hear that often with a rock group done in a way that is listenable or even approaching good. So I think it's kind of a shock that my overall take, yes, this album lost me at times. There were a couple of songs that I was just kind of a no on,
Yeah.
but my overall take is like this is one of the most creative and interesting records we've listened to in a long time. Like I get why it's so praised and considered
Sure.
such an essential record of the 90s because it is so unique and creative. So I enjoyed my listen through, even though there are definitely some songs that kind of lost me because I thought this was just like such a cool, unique piece of art from this group.
Right. As an album,
Yeah,
it's a unique collection of songs.
definitely.
I completely agree with that. I do think it goes a little off the rails at times for me personally,
Hmm.
but I respect the craft that went into
Yeah,
it.
there was never a time when it went off the rails when I was like, this is like selling out or just plain bad. It was like they
Yeah.
went off the rails doing something
I mean,
authentic.
like, here's what I'll tell you. Like, realistically, and we're going to disagree here,
Sure.
but like another artist that goes completely off the rails at times in a creative way that I don't like is like Beck.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So it calling a similar time
Yeah.
frame into mind.
Hmm.
Whereas like unlike Beck,
And I'm more forgiving of Beck for
you're more forgiving of
you know.
Beck, which is why, there's a little disagreement there. But in this album, the vast majority of it is still pleasant to my ear while
Mhm.
also being extremely creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go into Chaosmosis. Um, and I'll tell you this album, it felt like it made sense based on what I'd listened to before. So this was the change where I'm just like, okay, now that I know what Screamadelic is all about, I can see that you have gone in this direction. Like this feels like the same band now. Not that it's
Yeah.
the same album or like um, they're just like coasting. But this album also didn't necessarily grab me in a way that the first two did. Like the first two grabbed me in very different ways. Um, but because I felt like the highs maybe weren't as notable or interesting to me, while there were large swaths of this album that were pleasant or enjoyable, when it lost me more than Screamadelica for sure. Because Screamadelica was still like, okay, but where are they going to take this? Okay, hold on, what's going to happen next? Now I'm just like, all right, there's some okay songs, there are some like not so good songs, um, but there were definitely like good moments. Um, you have the interesting Haim backing vocals, on a couple of these. There's Sky Ferreira who comes in and sings on track 6. I don't know if you thought this because I didn't know who she was, or I was just listening to the quality of voice, and I was like, "Nate, is that Haley Williams?"
I
It
did look
sounded a
it up to
lot
make
like
sure it
her.
wasn't
Yeah,
her.
I had to check to see that it wasn't Haley Williams. So, I mean, like at the end of the day, my answer is this is the worst of the 3 albums. This is the album that definitely lost me the most. But there were parts of it that were fine, and like it was an album overall.
Uh, for context, give me the third Primal Scream album over all 6 albums last week.
Oh, sure. Yes.
I just want to just so the audience can kind of gauge
Hmm.
where our minds are at.
Yes.
But this was definitely the weakest of the 3 albums for me as well. It was a bit more of a shift in the same direction they had shifted,
Hmm.
but not a direction that I particularly liked
Yeah,
the distance they traveled into it.
I agree.
I did think the vocal duties were an interesting approach, having Haim on here, having a couple other spots where different vocalists were singing and like kind of filling the space. It improved the vocal quality for me because, like, as I mentioned, the vocals were a bit of a downturn for me.
Yeah.
It did create just a little bit of like disjointedness to me as well, though.
Hmm.
So like, whereas in the other albums the vocals were weaker, but there was consistency to them. On this one, because there's so many different singers taking cracks at things and taking, like, the other singers that are involved aren't just singing like backing vocals throughout. Like they're singing like little melodic
Yeah.
lines throughout. Like
Hmm.
their vocals are soloed at times throughout this.
Yeah.
And it just created just a bit of disjointedness, almost like compilation album feeling, or
Yeah.
like almost like a super group style where it's
Okay. Yeah.
like a bunch of celebrity singers get together and sing on an album, and it's like cool. It just felt closer to that than like a
Hmm.
band releasing an album.
Yeah.
So that was like my drawback on it, but I did like the approach, and I did think that like the songs were for the most part enjoyable, but definitely the least overall enjoyable of the 3 albums for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let me get into this group, this Primal Scream. And for their unique thing, we've already been talking about it. Like there was just no getting away from it as I was reading about them. It's their sound, right? Like
Yeah, it
this group,
certainly is.
they sound like no one else that we have ever heard before. They started out jangle pop. They got into like more psychedelic territory. They had some garage rock to them. They have some Stones. They have some Beatles. They have some Kinks. And then they have like dance and electronic music of the 90s and like going forward. So I basically think that they're impossible to define. And of all the artists that we've covered over the years, like they are near the tip top of that like most undefinable genre blending um, in their writing of anyone that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
So you got to give them credit where credit's due there. For their highlight, I had kind of no choice but to go with Screamadelica because there's a reason I didn't want to get to the way that it's critically reviewed in my review because, like, yes, it's their most popular album. It's 2 times platinum in the UK, but
Yeah.
it's also 135 on Colin Larkin's all-time 1,000 albums. It was number 437 on Rolling Stone's most recent 500 greatest albums. It's basically like if you look at every list of like albums from 1991, like Melody Maker or Enemy, or albums of the 90s, Q and Pitchfork, like every single music publication you can imagine has it on basically all of their lists somewhere at some point. It is
Right.
considered like a classic.
Which we know usually means we love the album.
Yeah, right. It means absolutely nothing. To us.
If anything,
But
it means sometimes we
it's
hate those
oftentimes
albums.
it does.
Yeah,
Yes,
usually they're like, "This is the greatest album." I'm like,
I
"This
know.
is actual
This is
shit
not
on a
very good.
plate. What are you doing?"
Yeah, but it was unique, and no one's ever shit on that type of plate before.
The aroma of it, like, fuck,
Yeah.
dude, no.
It's
Like
different.
sometimes
It's
shit's
different.
just shit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I'm talking to you,
Um,
Pavement.
yeah, yeah, I'm with that.
I'm talking to you, New York Dolls.
Yeah, wow, you're really just digging back into season one. Ah,
Well,
yeah, but you're right. So that was their highlight. Their low light, a few members of the band have passed. So Rob Young died in 2014, Martin Duffy in 2022, and I think this sort of also goes into their meanest thing, the low light. So Martin Duffy had been with the band for 30 years. Not an original member of the band, but who had been, playing and touring with them for 30 years. And
long
when he,
tenure.
yeah, it's a long tenure. When he died, his son basically came out and said he had never once been like treated like part of the band. He had never been paid. He had only been paid as a studio and touring musician, never as a band member, despite like being with them for 30 years. Like basically his son came out and said they kind of treated this guy who was in the band as shit. And like never really gave him a fair shake.
Yeah, don't love that.
Don't love that either. Um, and also to go along with me, like just reading through their early period, so many people had to get fired from this band over the first few years before they even recorded their first album, or while they were trying to record their first album, where they had like a lot of studio musicians come in and play the parts for people because they were maybe not competent enough to play their own parts on the album. And that was causing some problems, and that's why certain people got fired before they ended up, really moving forward. Um,
Ooh.
so that was all going on too.
Ooh.
And also in those early tumultuous times, you get your 6 degrees of Totem Talks because the band had been active in the early and mid 80s, but we know they don't put out their first album until 87. We know they're fluctuating members up until that point. But really, what happens is they take off when Bobby Gillespie quits his other band to join them full time, and the band that he was playing drums in, even though he was not the drummer for Primal Scream, was the Jesus and Mary chain.
No.
Yep.
They're back. I almost brought them up
Yep.
in my anger at Pavement and New
Yeah.
York Dolls.
So go figure that the lead vocalist of Primal Scream was actually also the drummer of the Jesus and Mary chain.
I'll be honest, wasn't
You
good
like
at either one.
Yeah, but you probably like us singing better now than you liked
I
us drumming then.
Oh, yeah. Well, because it's hard to hear the drumming when it's like that's the
Yeah,
entire sound. That's what they went for.
I know.
Brutal.
Yes. So that's all that, and then we just get to nice, and I was like, this sort of counts as nice, I guess. They had written and recorded a song called "Bomb the Pentagon," and it was all set to come out on their 2002 album. But then 9/11 happened, and they canceled that whole song about bombing the Pentagon and decided to rewrite it and change the lyrics and turn it into the song called Rise. So they have some level of sensitivity to 9/11
You know
and
what?
chose not to write that song.
Kudos to them. Kudos to them for not releasing that song.
Yeah, it was not a
Dear
good time
Lord.
to do that.
That would have been like if Rocky Like a Hurricane came out this week.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, my Lanta.
Yeah. So that is Primal Scream.
All right, well, I guess there's only one thing to do is take that Primal Scream and multiply it by 311, and we'll do
That's right.
311.
Okay. I'm going to do something smart and just fill in the album number on the sheet right now while we're in between.
Wow, look at you.
I know.
Look
right?
at you.
I don't know why I haven't done this in previous weeks.
I can tell you right now that 311 has 13 studio albums.
Okay, that is good to know. So that they're actually going to start in the same place. All right, now I go onto the Wikipedia. Are you 311 is a natural number following 310 and preceding 312. The actual number 311 has its own Wikipedia page, and like it goes on from what I just said. There's more to it than it's a
Oh my
number.
God, it's like a full thing.
Like, it's not a ton, but, like, there's a couple paragraphs.
Oh, I'm reading it. All right. I'm ready.
Okay, good. And I am ready in 3, 2.
311 is a natural number following 310 and preceding 312. 311 is the 64th prime, a twin prime with
Oh,
313, an
excellent.
irregular prime, which is also known as an emerp, and it's an Einstein prime with no imaginary part and real part of the form of 3n minus 1.
You know, that I understood everything you just said.
Yeah, I certainly did not. I was reading a script there.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
Nick
no, didn't get that.
between the session between our Primal Scream and 311, our little break, pointed out that the number 311 has its own wiki page.
Yes, it
So
does.
had to read that. Now let's get into the real meat and
Yes,
potatoes, though.
of course.
311 is an American rock band formed in Omaha, Nebraska. And the band was formed in 1988 and is still active today.
Okay.
We covered 3 albums. We started with the aptly named Music, which came out in 1993.
Yeah,
They're letting you
we'll
know what
get
they're
there later.
about. We followed that up with the eponymous third album,
Classic.
311, which came out in 1995.
Was their 11th
And
album also called 311?
oh my gosh, I don't think it was, but I
Total
do
missed
wish it
opportunity.
was. I'm really upset if it's not. No, I'm going to have to go check. But we did wrap things up with 2019's Voyager.
Yes, we
And
did.
that's it. And they're my band, so I will start. Here's the thing. I had no clue what to expect. I didn't know this band going in. I certainly was not expecting, like, what I got. And by that, I mean, it's like rap funk metal, hip hop, this first album.
Mm-hmm.
My writing is, it's like if Beastie Boys, Linkin Park, and Sugar Ray had a baby.
Okay, yeah.
Whatever that means, that's what this album is. It's if the Beastie Boys, it's like if that was a nice little 3-parented baby. That's what you get with this album.
I think that's a very fair comparison.
Also, I think more than any album we've listened to, maybe this entire podcast, maybe this entire half season, this is the most dated album we've listened to.
Okay.
This is the most early 1990s hip hop bullshit I've ever fucking heard in my life, dude.
I can get on board with that.
Like, it was so evident immediately what was happening. I would almost predicted the entire thing, like from Jump Street. Like the first album, the first song started, and I could have written the rest of the album, I think. For better or worse, it's definitely not my genre. It's not like it's not my cup of tea, we'll say. But in this genre, it's like pretty catchy. It's not as like kind of vulgar as a lot of other artists in this space can get, which means they're actually writing lyrics that are like focused on like a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of clever lyric writing, rather than just like fuck bitch, fuck bitch, fuck bit. Like that's
one
like,
of my favorites.
That's like what a lot of the lyrics of the time were. Maybe not quite with the comparisons I gave, but definitely in this genre. Because in the rap metal genre of the 90s, you have like Limp Bizkit and shit. Mm-hmm. And like, they're not that.
Yeah.
So I didn't love it, but it's definitely...
It wasn't actively offensive.
Yeah, it was much better than a lot of other artists I've heard in this space, even though I don't particularly enjoy it.
Right. So I had kind of a reaction to the first song here, which is called Welcome. And as it started, for about 10 seconds, I had a lot of hope for this band because there was like obvious ska influences, maybe some reggae. Like, I want to be clear, like, I heard the instrumental arrangement of the first song and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. and the vocals are also a part of it, and they were very bad.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the
I
so
was not.
the you
Yeah,
liked the Sugar Ray part, you didn't like the Beastie Boys part.
yeah, but I think even better than Sugar Ray, though. Like, to be clear, I would compare at their very best. I think some of their musical parts, especially because it has this exact sound from the early '90s, their best instrumental work compares to like your No Doubts or like your high end Sublimes.
Okay.
I think definitely in terms of influence and style,
I
you're
thought you were
there.
going to say that I'm not going to remember the name. Is it not it's not just Big Fish.
Oh, Real Big Fish. Yeah.
Real Big Fish. I was
Okay.
like, oh my
Yeah.
god, I
I
was
mean,
so
obviously, Real
close.
Big Fish is like a little bit different because, I mean, you get it on certain No Doubt albums and not on other, but like Real Big Fish constantly has the horn section to go
Yeah.
with it. But like, if you think about just the style that the guitar bass drums are playing in,
Right.
it has some of the best aspects on this album. And I actually think that in terms of like changing time signatures within songs, trying something different in terms of your progression, this album almost had like the most clever songwriting. In fact, I'm going to say this album, the music was the most cleverly written
Sure.
of their three, for me at least. And it's a shame because I think that the musicians in this band are good, but the rap parts were just not it, man. It was not blending well. Like the vocals are okay. They're not terrible when they actually sing some melodic lines, but none of these songs was fully good. Every one of these songs had good parts and really bad parts, and like it wasn't enough to make me want to go back and listen for the good parts because you just have to suffer through the parts that suck. Um,
Yeah.
so, so
I
that's
get
all
it.
for music. Then going into 311, so I immediately start scouring when I got to this album. Like, okay, where on the track list is Amber going to be? Because that was the only song I knew by 311, and it's not on here, um, which was very disappointing. And it was even more disappointing when I found out it was more of the same thing as the first album. It has a lot of the same pros and cons. Um, like there's some songs that have melodic singing parts, but they're few and far between, and it's rarely for the entire song without having some sort of vocal that comes in and kind of spoiled it for me. Um, so at the end of the day, I was like, this is worse than the debut. I didn't think they made as many interesting songwriting choices in the music, and nothing really changed in the vocal approach. So I think this was a slight step down.
Sure. Okay. I will preface this by saying that I disagree. I think it was a horizontal step to the left. And for that, like what I mean is the one thing that's clear on this album that's not on the first album is they are trying very definitively to have more of a alt rock influence
Mhm.
while combining it. Like this is the album that if I thought the first album had Linkin Park DNA,
Mhm.
this album I'd be getting a paternity test because I think this is really Linkin Park's DNA.
Okay, yeah,
This is like if like rest in peace. This is like if Linkin Park did not have Chester Bennington.
sure.
That's
So
like
they
what it.
currently don't. What's her name? Emily
Uh,
Armstrong. It's a
well,
whole big
but
controversy right now.
yes, that is true. But controversy notwithstanding, what I mean is if they only had Mike Shinoda doing rapping bits
Yeah, no,
and like they didn't have a
an
absolutely stellar
outstanding vocalist.
vocalist.
Yeah,
That's what this band feels like right now.
yeah,
It's definitely more rock influence, but there's still just a little bit too much of that rap hip hop in like vibe here.
yeah. It doesn't feel like it fits.
It doesn't feel like it fits. It's a very oil and water mixture to me at this point. This album is, while maybe being slightly less dated, is still very dated, firmly in the
Yeah,
mid
yeah,
1990s.
undoubtedly.
So I would say like it's just a horizontal step to the left for me. It's not worse because I do like that they're adding that rock influence.
Mhm.
I do agree with you that they did subtract some maybe intricacy in their sound,
Yeah, yeah,
but it felt like they moved to a sound that they thought fit better. It didn't,
sure.
but they thought it might.
Yeah, the difference for me was literally the first album had two or three times when they did something musically, and I was like, Oh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And the second album
Uh,
just didn't have any of those moments for me where I stopped and was
sure.
like, what did they just do there?
I I get it. I do. Moving on to Voyager. Third album, third definitive attempt to change their sound. That being said, it's interesting, their choices that they made on this album. You've gone pretty far out of their original like rap, hip hop, like rap metal sound. It like this is an alt rock album with a little bit of like reggae rock thrown in and some parts where there's like rap. Like
Yeah,
that's kind of where you've gone. It's probably to me the most musical of the three albums.
sure.
I
It's the most melodic.
It's the most melodic. I enjoyed the listen of this album as like an album I put on while I was working today and like was just getting work done and listening and taking some notes. Nothing really jumped out where I was like, this is a good song.
Sure.
But it was altogether like okay to me. This felt like the most thought out album, we'll say. Like the album where they were like, we have defined our sound. We're no longer mixing and mashing and going crazy. We're comfortable where we are and we're creating in this space. That's kind of the vibe that I got.
Sure. So the immediate difference I think was clear to me was the production on this album. You could tell that it was no longer the 1990s. This is a different time. And the first song also kind of throws you off because it's by far the most metally song that you get on the record. And I was like, I was like, oh wow, they're digging further into that metally type of influence. And then a second song happened. I'm like, oh, okay, let me cross out this note because okay, a third song, nope, definitely I'm blacking that out. Okay, yeah, it's not happening again. So that happened less on this album. And the one of my favorite things about this album that I think they should have done with a lot of the other ones was that there is an all instrumental version of it available on Apple Music, which I think would have really benefited the first two albums.
Oh man, you would have
For me.
loved music.
I would have liked them a lot more. And then for the rest of it, like I think it's sort of like you said, this one was sonically probably by far the easiest to listen to.
Yeah.
But I also felt like a lot, especially on the B side of this album, a lot of it was just kind of like, it's like, okay, 2019, there are a lot of like pop artists or artists in the almost semi-rock, but still mostly pop place that I would have been like, oh, if they sang these songs, I would have been like, yeah, of course. You know, like they ran very, very far away from their original idea towards the mean. Like they were heading right for that average pop song space and running fast for it. But there was a great guitar solo on the song Space and Time. So like there were little things mixed in here that were worth listening for. But otherwise, like, yes, that it become more listenable to you and I, sure. Is that because the songwriting was better? No, I think it was because the songwriting was more average.
Yeah. Like I said, it was something that could easily blend in while I was working.
Right, exactly.
I'll give you some facts. Now, before I get into the facts about specifically 311, I found a little fun fact that I thought was very
number
interesting. Yes, the number 311. I found a little fun fact that I thought was interesting. So one thing about 311 is by the time you are listening to this, whoever you are, there will be another album out.
Yes.
And the same is true of Primal Scream.
Yep.
So
I noticed that this week too. Both
311 has an album coming out on October 25th, 2024. We are recording on October 10th, 2024.
Yep.
And Primal Scream, 311's album is called Full Bloom.
Okay.
Primal Scream has an album called Come Ahead that is coming out on November 8th, 2024. Yeah.
Yep,
So
I noticed
within
that this
just a
week as we
couple
were
of
doing it.
weeks of each other,
What are the odds?
they're both releasing another album. So I thought that was a fun little tidbit. Getting into some facts here. So the unique facts, I have two.
All
The
right.
first one is just the origin of the name,
Okay.
which I thought was funny. So the band was chosen the name from a police code for indecent exposure in Omaha, Nebraska,
Okay.
after one of the friends of the band was arrested and cited for skinny dipping in a public pool. And
Interesting.
that was the arresting code, 311.
Okay, 311.
So they
We
became
got
311.
311 here.
The other little unique fact about this band is starting in the year 2000, they have their own like unofficial holiday. On March 11th,
March 11th?
every year, 311 performs. They dedicate the day because in the United States it's written as 311.
Mhm.
And every other year between March 11th, or every other year on March 11th between 2000 and 2020, and then every year since 2021. So they took 2020 off, as most bands did. They performed this like really long extended concert for thousands of fans. In recent years, it's kind of split across 2 or 3 days.
That's pretty cool.
In 2021, it was a live stream due to COVID, but you know, interesting thing. Like they kind of took their band name and it's now like a holiday / festival situation that their fans are all involved in. I thought that was really unique.
I love it.
Highlight, it's got to be their self-titled. I mean, their self-titled album, which apparently, according to 311 fans, is colloquially known as the Blue Album.
Okay.
That's not what I think of when I hear the Blue
When I
Album.
hear the Blue Album, I think of
Weezer.
Weezer.
But that's fine. I'm not gonna knock 311 fans for calling it that. It is a Blue Album.
It is blue.
So the Blue Album, or 311, reached number 12 in the Billboard 200 charts. Its single "Down" topped the Billboard Hot Modern Rock charts in 1996. One thing that was interesting about this album was that, unlike their first two albums, it was recorded live.
Okay.
So all of it was recorded at the same time. The difference between live recording and track recording, for anybody who doesn't know, live recording is the band performs the song together and the audio tech records each of them, and that is one take. Versus, and then, you know, usually there's a little bit of like plugging of parts in and like little things to smooth it out. But for the most part, it's one performance. Tracks are kind of what it says. There'll be a scratch track. So like the drums and guitar will play, and then the drums you use, and then the bass gets built on the drums, guitar gets built on the bass and the drums, vocal gets built on the guitar, bass, and drums, and you have a song. Nothing wrong with that. It works. For some bands, it works better than others.
Yeah.
I would think for this band, according to how successful it was, that could maybe be a differentiating factor.
Mm-hmm.
But in contrast to Nick's point, it could also be why maybe some of these songs are slightly less complex.
Sure.
If you're live performing them, maybe they're just slightly less complex than they would be if you have that like freedom to track it, which they did in the first two albums. So some hit or miss there, but however, it's clearly the highlight. I did not have a low light for this band.
Well, that's good.
Nobody, as far as I could tell, has died. Nobody has. There's been no like horrific bad blood with them. There's been no like getting fired or like crazy arrests or anything. So instead, I want to talk about their business ventures.
Okay.
Because I thought they were kind of interesting. So since 2015, the band has collaborated with Nebraska Brewing Company and Rock Brother Brewing on an ale called 311 Amber Ale.
Oh, okay.
So you can kind of buy it anywhere. It's a multiple like flavored brand that is available for at-home delivery in certain states. I don't know the states. I'm not telling you the states. But they exist. Probably not Pennsylvania. In 2017, they started releasing cannabis vapor pens, also known as vapes.
Right.
called the Grassroots Uplifter,
Hmm.
which is available in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California, places where you can legally buy weed.
Right.
In 2018, the Grassroots Uplifter V2 was released. So beer and weed.
Okay.
Their business ventures are beer and weed.
I'm
I just thought that
50%
was
sold.
interesting. It totally fits the people that I think of this band.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Like the people that are interested in listening to this band are the people that are drinking their beer and smoking their weed.
I
I
think that's fair.
no shade meant at all. I respect the grind. I just thought that was interesting.
Mhm.
Nicest things. I also didn't have a meanest thing. I'll be clear.
That's good. Yeah.
This band has no low light. This band
It's
is
nice
not
when you
mean,
struggle
as
for
far
those
as I can
things.
tell. I struggled mightily.
Yeah.
So the nicest thing, Nick Hexum, who's kind of the leader of the band, from what I was garnering. If any fan of 311 tells me I'm wrong, I'll believe you. But
Yeah, I would too.
it is what it is. Nick Hexum's the lead vocalist, of course, lead vocalist, and also like the keyboards and situation, rhythm guitar. He kind of does a bit of everything.
Yeah.
He has worked with a charity group called Band of Merrymakers. So he collaborated on their charity collaboration. So Band of Merrymakers is a holiday music supergroup, which was created by songwriter Sam Hollander and Kevin Griffin in 2014. And the group was established to raise awareness and garner donations for various nonprofit organizations and charities. So
Nice.
it's a cool focus.
Okay.
And it also leads directly into our 6 degrees of Totem Talks, because also on the album that Nick Hexum was on were 2 artists, one of whom makes just the most sense, as we had already kind of mentioned, Mark McGrath.
Yep. Okay.
Just Mark McGrath absolutely should be working with
I
the
saw
people
that
in this
name
band.
as soon as you started mentioning it. I was like, all right, let me look that up so I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Mark McGrath, right?
And the other one is on the actual song that Nick Hexum contributed, Small Pools.
How about that?
Yeah, small pools. Just a random reference to small pools, not large pools.
No,
Only
we won't
small
have
pools.
those.
So I just thought that was fun as well, and that's kind of all I have. They're honestly just seem like chill peeps from what I could read. I was
That's
reading
right.
nothing but chill stories. Whenever I really can't find anything, I start like digging for dirt,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't find any dirt. So either they're really good at hiding their dirt, or maybe there's just not dirt.
Yeah, let's hope. Oh my God. Oh no, never mind. I thought that it said for a moment there that Terry Glenn performed vocals on that album as well, but it was Tyler Glenn instead. David Ryan Harris is on it. He plays with John Mayer a lot as his other guitarist.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
But there's cool people on there.
Yeah, Band of
It's an
Merrymakers seems
yeah,
like a
it's a very
cool
interesting little
thing.
thing. All right. We have to give points. Yes.
Yes, it is time for points.
Okay, Primal Scream. Hey, I think they get. I don't. I don't think they get the no points for not having any hits, because clearly, like in the UK, they were selling gold and platinum albums. They were selling albums in in Europe and whatnot. I think
Sure.
they might have had some Japanese certifications too or something. And they do have one album that is considered a classic of the decade. So like I knew that Primal Scream existed specifically because I knew that Screamadelica existed, because I've seen that album cover 1,000 times on every different list of great albums. So this was one that I had actually just kind of waited to listen to
Sure.
for when they came up on the podcast. And I think that level of recognition is at least worth something.
Okay. I don't disagree with you.
Probably between 1 and 2 for our purposes.
Yeah, I think it's like a 1.3 personally. Like that's at the lower end of the ones.
That's fair.
But
I understand that all these things being familiar to me does not necessarily put me in a wide audience of people.
That is true. You are
Yeah. Also,
quite the niche.
we totally forgot to mention that they cover a 13th Floor Elevator song on Screamadelica. I think I was leaving it for you.
Oh
Um,
my god, dude. That would have been a
Slip
great
Inside This
6
House,
degrees.
though, is a song that was the second track on
That's
Screamadelica and
funny.
is
Oh my
also
gosh, I did not put that together.
on Easter
See, they're
Everywhere by
not my
13th
band,
Floor
so I didn't look
Elevators.
at their writing credits.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, Tommy Hall and the Electric Jug is credited on that song.
Gotta love it.
You do. What are we thinking for 311? I mean, I think strangely enough, they had a triple platinum album that doesn't contain the only song that you and I have ever heard by them before.
That is correct.
So that definitely
Um,
has to count for something. But also the fact that Amber exists has to count for something.
yeah, this is going to be slightly higher for me
I agree.
because even the albums that don't certify for them are all charted. Every album they released after they stopped charting or after they stopped certifying. So 2001 is their last RIAA Gold.
Hmm.
And then they have a number of albums that aren't. They are all debuting or entering the top 10 US charts in the top 200,
Sure.
minus the most recent one in 2019 peaked at 18.
Yeah.
So they're still charting well. I think it's a number closer to a 2.
I put a 1.9.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Moving on to Primal Scream, we've got 11 albums. Both artists this week are starting in the range that gives them a 5.8 to start here. So
Yeah, 11
um,
albums for Primal Scream, 13 albums for
yeah.
311.
So either way, it's 5.8. It's a wash. I'm going to argue that at least Primal Scream doesn't lose any points here. They have 1 UK double platinum, 4 UK golds, multiple Japanese golds, and an Irish gold. I think you just put it all together and it's enough to keep their score as it is.
I'll allow it.
And then it just comes down to the enjoyment factor. And I am willing to give this group 0.1.
Oh, okay.
Because I enjoyed their first 2 albums enough to give them a 0.1.
You know what? I will also give them a 0.1. I think I enjoyed in a similar vein to you.
Yeah. Moving on to 311. Also
So
5.8, but this time I think they're going to get a slight sales bump.
I agree because they have 2 albums. One went triple platinum, one went platinum, and then 4 albums that went gold. And they all went gold and platinum in the US, which I'm not saying it equates to more, except for the fact that it literally does equate to more.
Yes.
It's more people that are required to certify in this country.
So I think the answer is that they go up to a 6.
Yes, and I did read the number that I read was roughly 10 million in the total sales.
Sure.
Which makes a lot of sense when you consider the certifications. Yeah. So yeah, bumps up to a 6, and then from there,
they're your band. I'll let you go first.
I'll be honest with you. Didn't enjoy a whole lot of this. I recognized that. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. Okay, here's a good way to say it. We have covered bands that do things that I don't like poorly. Mm-hmm. And we've covered bands that do things that I don't like well.
Correct.
This is a group that skews slightly more in the does something that I don't like better than other bands that I don't like doing it.
Right.
And for that reason, I'm only going to take away 0.1.
Okay. And I am going to take away 0.2. Sure. I was on the fence about like 0.2-ish maxing out there. Just because I think when they finally became listenable sonically, that was when their songwriting to me was the least interesting and the most poppy and like, like I don't like this that much. I don't like the songs that much, even though they're easier to listen to.
I get it. I get it. I just, they're doing stuff that I don't like in terms of genre, but they're doing a good job of it. And I'm trying to keep that in my brain.
Fair. Moving on to instrumental talent, starting with Primal Scream. I think the first album is honestly where you get the most of this. because
Sure.
it's the album that they're kind of the most straightforward guitar, bass, drums band, and I think they sound good on this album. It's so weird to try to judge what's happening on the other records because none of it is bad. Like,
No.
there was never a moment where the musicianship would have kind of eh, told me to bounce in one direction from the average or another. It was just like so full of different things that this is a band that's so hard to evaluate on instrumental talent. But I think all their points are coming in the next category, is what I'm trying to say.
That's fair.
um,
So, what are you thinking
I
here?
live near the average here, if I'm being honest.
I do too, but I'm going to be honest with you. I live slightly under the average because I think the vocals
Sure.
drag an average band slightly under, and by that I mean like a 4.8 or a 4.9. I don't mean too
Yeah,
low.
I have already typed in a 4.9 because I was
Okay,
guessing that was your what was your gonna say.
it works
Um,
for me.
311 on the other hand, um, is a group that I would like very clearly be above average on until the vocals come in.
Yeah.
Um,
Now hold on. Okay. Yes, I do not disagree with
yeah,
you. The instruments are better than the vocals, but
like by a wide margin.
I want to be clear. The genre of music, the rap
Mhm.
hip hop vibe, they're doing it better than other bands. Other
Yeah, yeah,
other
yeah.
bands in this genre. They are not competing with the actual hip hop scene of the
Yeah,
1990s.
exactly. Like it's hard to
I'm
qualify.
comparing them to like
I
Limp
know.
Bizkit. I'm comparing them
Sure.
to like Mike Shinoda in Linkin Park, and I think they're closer to Shinoda than Durst.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair to say.
So I don't
Um,
want to take too
it's
many
just like
points
such a
away for the
different
rap.
skill than like
Oh, I
singing
agree.
melodically, so I have a harder time judging it.
I
I'm
agree.
not as
And you
familiar with
know
it.
me, I'm a sucker
Yeah,
for good vocals, and
yeah,
these are not.
my
I'm
answer
just
is still in the
trying to,
fives. I want to be
yeah,
clear because I think that the rest of the band is that good.
yeah, I think
Although
so.
they show it less and less over time.
They do. What number do you think? Do you think,
I would be comfortable with like a 5.3 or 5.4.
let's give them the 5.4. I think that's a good spot. I do think they go down a bit for the rap,
Yeah,
but they're doing rap better than
sure. Than other
other
comparable acts. I
bands.
think that makes sense.
What I'm saying is I hate Limp Bizkit. I want to
Yes,
be
I also
clear.
do.
That's what I'm telling
Yes.
everyone today.
Oh, they have a similar problem of the rest of the band is clearly just better than Fred Durst too.
Well, yeah, but he's just
Even
a
though the
garbage
songs are
person.
obviously like offensive.
At least I looked at 311 and didn't have 18 reasons why they're also garbage people
Yeah,
like we did with Limp Bizkit.
exactly. So the interesting thing here, I think the most interesting grade of the day is the songwriting grade for Primal Scream. Because I
Okay.
thought their first album was solid. Um, I think their second album is, like I said, genuinely one of the most interesting and creative things that we have experienced on the podcast, even if it lost us at times.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
don't think
good
that the
art
third
does
album,
that.
like, yeah, exactly. The third album didn't quite hit that, but it wasn't like bad. And I didn't feel like half the songs were like, let's kind of just go to the pop meme the way I felt with 311. So I think this is a band that's hitting the average at their worst and at their best is like hitting in the nines for creativity and songwriting.
Okay.
Because if I'm being trying to
Um,
be fair and judging us against ourselves and the other acts and what I heard and sheer innovation from this group, like Screamadelica's got to be up there.
Listen, I completely agree. And if Screamadelica was the quality of this band throughout,
Yeah,
we'd have an easy time.
yeah,
The question is, do we think more of this band is Screamadelica or more
right.
of this band is, the other two albums?
And it's hard to say. I mean, they certainly like if their chart positions are in any indication of how people feel like they're good because you know from Screamadelica on they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight albums chart in the top 10 and 2 hit 12. But I don't know. I don't know how to equivocate that. I can only say like it's obviously got to be a number like a good chunk above the average, but we can
Yeah, so
account
we're
for the
out of
fact
the
that we don't know.
fives.
Probably into the sixes solidly, I'd
Yeah,
say.
I think the sixes is a good spot. Uh yeah, we're out of the fives. We're in the sixes. Let's live in this world a little bit. Where you kind of
Yeah,
want
I
to
mean,
settle
I
in.
would be okay with like just sitting in 6.5 and kind of
Let's do it.
setting up shop there.
Write it down.
Excellent. 311.
Right. Here's the thing. It gets worse.
Right.
It gets worse.
First album, I would have been willing to go above the average, even though I hated the vocal approach with the rap stuff that I didn't think blended as well, because I genuinely thought that they were writing good parts.
Yes. I think the first album, if I had to give the first album itself a score, I'd be like getting close to a 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second album, giving it its own score, I'd be in the 5 still.
Sure.
The third album, I'm probably in the high 4s.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the 4s as well.
So kind of averaging all that out, like a 5.9, like a 5.4, and like a 4.8. I mean, what do you think? Like a 5.3?
Yeah, like a 5.3. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think we just mathed it out, man.
Yeah, you're
sometimes,
right.
Sometimes the formula just writes itself.
It truly does. As far as lyrical content is concerned, nothing took me out or brought me in particularly with Primal Scream.
No,
It
was all just there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the delivery mechanism of the vocals at times detracts a bit from the vocals, and I don't mean just that he wasn't a good singer.
Yeah,
I mean like in the second verse in the second album when they kind of went like that weird vocal breakdown at times,
mm-hmm.
and the third album where it was so many different singers all like putting a piece in the pie.
Sure. Several of whom were a lot better than
that's true.
Gillespie.
The quality of vocal aside, the introduction of the lyrics at times was a little off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're looking at a slightly
below,
like in the
like
4s, slightly below,
like a 4.6 or something.
4.6, perfect.
Okay, and then that brings us to 311.
Here's the thing. I did mention on a positive note for their lyrics. Unlike other bands in this space, again, there's less vulgarity, there's less like blatant profanity, which I'm not against if it makes sense for a song.
Right.
But it shouldn't be the point of a song.
Like shock value only takes you so far.
Right. If you need to write a whole song just to say the word fuck, dude, like there's better ways. There's better ways to go about it. And this is not a band that does that. They're writing more story based and more emotion based rather than like sex based.
Mm-hmm.
It's still not great. Like it's still not like poetry to me.
Yeah.
But I think this is a band that is legitimately doing what their genre calls for above average.
Okay.
And that to me makes them around a 5 to a 5.1. Like,
okay.
They are average.
Do you have a strong between the two? I'll let you have the final say.
Whatever you're feeling, a 5 or a 5.1, your generosity will give or take.
I'm going to go with 5.1.
Okay. Feeling generous today.
I am feeling generous today. And that brings us to the X factor here.
So the only thing I had for 311 is 311 Day. I thought that was a clever little thing, like their own holiday that thousands of fans show up for.
Sure.
They've been doing it for 24 years with 1 year off because of COVID. I think that's a cool little niche, maybe 0.1, 0.2.
Okay.
Like just something interesting.
All right. I'll give you the 0.1 there because I gave you the 5.1 before. And I think for Primal Scream, it's the stuff that like kind of getting more specifically into why Screamadelica is considered one of the great albums, one of the classic albums, and it is I think a very new direction for rock music, like this idea that you can have samples and interpolations, uh, and like all these different dubs in over a live rock recording. Like, I almost think that this is genre innovative in and of itself. That like this is a band that like sits at the cusp of the dance rock electronic music. Like I don't even know how to describe it. I just think it's like they did something for the first time in a way that blended multiple genres, um, that I don't think had ever really been done before this way.
Yeah. I could see
So
giving
while
them a
I
point
don't
one.
think they've like birthed their entire own genre, um, I think it's like almost semi-genre points.
I could live with giving them a point one there, which
Okay,
would then just basically mean we gave both of them nothing.
right,
But
which
that's
is
fine.
fine. And I'll tell you, it did all come down to the last real score.
Okay.
And so we do have a winner this week.
Okay. Ready?
I'm ready. Okay, I like it. Winning this week with a grand total of 23.5 points is 311.
Fascinating.
And coming in second place this week with a grand total of 23.4 points
Oh my God.
is Primal Scream. If I didn't give you that 5-1, if I
Bet
didn't
you're
give you that
regretting it
5-1 at the end,
now.
no, I mean, it would have. Do you realize that we were this close to having two consecutive weeks where the
consecutive
score is
ties.
tied?
I would have been
Something that's
more
happened
willing
like
to tie break
twice
this
ever
one.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
we would have broken it in the other direction, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
But hey, ball don't lie, man.
That's
Ball
right.
don't lie.
That's right. So,
wow.
Everybody,
what a time.
Yeah, we got what we deserved. Oh, you know what? Let me just say right now, because this is the end of season 7.5. Should I just say out loud some artists who are slated for season 8?
Yeah, throw it out there.
Throw it out into the world, right?
Yeah.
So if you do come back when we're ready to start season 8, you will hear us cover artists such as the Ronettes, Tiny Richard, Little Richard, sorry, Kenneth Loggins, Fela Kuti, The Average White Band, Rihanna, Brian Eno, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles.
What a lineup.
Yes.
Honestly, do we just commit to the bit of the Average White Band and give them 5s straight across?
I think that would be
we give them 5s with a 2.5 X factor.
Oh, okay. Well, the 2.5 X factor helps.
I mean, we just give them the average of everything, so it was just straight in the middle, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
Cultural impact, average. Breadth of work, average. But they have 90 albums, average.
I mean, you know what's crazy to me? And I'm just going to say it right now, even though I'm sure we'll talk about it on the episode. You know the Average White Band? Like the funk band, Pick Up the Pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. They're Scottish.
They're Scottish.
Like, do you hear the song Pick Up the Pieces in your head and think, this is a Scottish band?
I feel like that happens all the time, though.
You hear that song and you're like, these guys are like from Memphis.
Yeah. I feel like Scotland in particular, Scottish bands typically surprise the crap out of me.
You know, I think we might have done one on the podcast today.
We did. Primal Scream is Scottish.
That's right. We did.
Another group that I'm like, are you sure you're Scottish?
Yeah, right. But it's just crazy.
You're from Glasgow.
That Average White Band is Scottish, based on what I know their music sounding like. So that just felt like a good fact to end this half season on.
Yeah, what a fascinating time. Listen, hang out, watch the backlog. We may or may not be taking a slight break between seasons here. We have to really discuss it. Now that it's happening, we have to hash out some details on that.
That's right.
But we'll be back better than ever stronger, faster. And while we're doing that, have a great day.
Fuck Jerry Lee Lewis.
It's so true. So, Nick,
Yes.
you're going to hate this.
All right, go ahead.
Like, I want to say 80% of the way through that podcast, I was like, I just realized that Nick sounds like he's not coming through that microphone.
Interesting.
Can you just tap that microphone for me? Yeah, you're definitely coming through your computer mic that whole time, dude. It's all right. I mean, it is what it is.
Audio output.
It doesn't sound bad. It definitely, like, it just sounds like a little bit of room noise. Like,
Okay.
I don't think it's, like, re-record worthy.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, like, I noticed it. Like, we were so far in. I was like, it's not even worth.
Yeah.
At this point, it's not worth it. If I noticed it, like, halfway through Primal Scream, I might have been like, all right.
Sure.
But I noticed it, like, during, like, vocal, like, instrumental talent.
Yeah,
like,
no point in doing
shit.
that.
Too late.
Oh, well.
That's fine. It's whatever.
It is.
Who's going to care? Us?
Us. Only us.
All right. Oh, man.
Oh, man, it's late.
It's late. But hey, I think it was productive. I'm glad we got the podcast done and didn't have to, like...
Agreed. Do it tomorrow.
Yeah. Tomorrow would have sucked for me.
Yeah.
So, all good. But yeah, I will... I'll talk to you Sunday. I guess we'll got to figure out a time for Sunday, but...
Okay. We'll figure it out.
You know, we'll get it all situated.
Excellent.
So, all right.
Okay.
Adios. All right. And goodbye to all of me, the only one here. But if you are here and I don't know who you are, you particularly have a great day.